welcome. It's like all the hotel crowd there, this is the scene. So, oh yeah, first thing, we have a paywall here today. So, actually we have to pay for this room. We pay by the empty beer, glasses. So just please leave all the empty glasses here.
Please buy beer.
Please buy beer. And another thing, please buy beer before we got the free beer. Not talking too much about that. I think that's Johanna's pitch. So that's going to be later, maybe if you're nice. Another thing before I let Johanna and Jussi say a couple of words about our speakers today, just something which might interest some of you. I just got an email from Runa from Tor, and those of you who were at Painobari when she was talking might remember her. She was kind of interesting. So if you're interested about getting some kind of a training, or your organization is interested about getting some kind of a training about Tor and privacy from journalistic point of view, they actually got some funding for that. So we're actually planning maybe to do something within the Hacks and Hackers, but also if you have some organization which might be interested in getting some kind of a Tor or private training, that's maybe something you want to talk with me, because that's going to be cheap and very helpful. Okay, I think that was my part.
All right. So, Jussi, you want to say something more?
Well, I'm just going to say hi, because we have a brilliant program here, and I just want to say to everyone that if anyone's interested in our development programs, I got these are just fresh out of the oven, because they are like Helsinki Sanomat minis that I can pass around.
So that's the table.
Yeah, that's sort of the paper wall or something like. And I can pass this around and answer your questions about our paywall. And we are introducing Johanna can introduce our program here, and we have some exciting news about the event in December, but we'll tell you that later.
Yeah. So today we're going to have Doug from Sourcefabric in Prague, and I'll just tell you something about the rest of the program before I let Doug begin. And after him, we're just going to have a small break probably, and also, well, you'll be able to ask him any questions you want. And then we'll have a little break, and then guys over there from rela.com are going to tell us how they built up their website. And then, in the end of this event today, Pia-Mari from Uutisraivaja, the innovation contest by Helsinki Sanomat Foundation, is going to tell us a little bit about the contest, and then she's going to be your hostess for a little speed dating trial. So the thing is, like, we're trying to get some coders and some journos speaking together, and for this there's a little perk, which is namely free beer. So just don't go anywhere before it starts.
And leave the glasses.
Yeah. And without further ado, Doug, it's all yours.
Thank you. Wow, thanks a lot. Big group. I'm very pleasantly surprised. My name is Douglas Arianes. I'm one of the founders of an organization, a nonprofit foundation based in the Czech Republic called Sourcefabric. And as you probably have recognized already, I am not Czech. I'm American, but I've lived in Prague for 20 years now, which means that I'm old. Pause for laughter.
I'm sorry, we didn't warm him up.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, every stand-up needs a warm-up.
Yeah. I came to Prague 20 years ago to work on a newspaper. So if there is a dividing line between hacks and hackers, I started out as a hack and sort of became a hacker. But if you talk to my developers, they don't think of me as a hacker at all. I came to Prague in 1992, pretty close after the Velvet Revolution, to work on a newspaper in Prague. and then got very much involved in the building of the Czech internet. Been doing web design since 1993. And for the past 3 years, I've been working as one of the co-founders of this organization called Sourcefabric, and we'll just sort of give you a little bit of an idea of what we're doing. But first I want to give you an idea of what the problems are that we're trying to deal with. There are a lot of things that people say that news has to do, or that it needs to do. One of them is that it needs to be easy to find. It needs to be visual. Mark Shuttleworth likes to say that pretty is a feature. It needs to be interactive. It needs to be local and international. It needs to involve citizens. It needs to be device ready. It needs to be instant and verifiable. It needs to be profitable. Profitable. Again, pause for laughter. Yeah, so who are we? We're this nonprofit foundation, and what we're doing is actually trying to create a code base of open source code that is specifically made for use by news media organizations. And our big bet with Sourcefabric is that the newsroom in a developed country is pretty much the same as a newsroom in a developing country. So the newsroom and the workflow that you have in a newsroom, say here in Helsinki, is not going to be very different than a newsroom in Harare in Zimbabwe. I've actually been in a lot of these places, and we've seen that really they're not very different at all. And so because of this, what we're doing is we're leveraging the open source model by saying, look, these newsrooms are the same, so why don't we make tools that are the same? And then by doing this, we can mutualize the cost of development, therefore making it a lot easier for people to do their work. I'll explain in a little bit what I mean by that. Currently, we have 60 employees. We're in 12 countries. We have our team members in 12 countries. Our team members speak 17 languages. We have 4 products, and then I think depending on how you divide it, probably about 13, 14 projects, open source projects. About 50,000 downloads a year. But to get back to this question about why open source, there are a lot of different reasons why. The first one is that there's a community of people. You can always turn to someone else who's in the same situation as you are and say, hey, did you get an answer to this, or did you figure this out? That's a really important thing, especially in an environment where you're trying new things, often very new things, and you're not exactly sure what the correct answer is going to be. Another big one is independence from vendors. It happens a lot that news organizations will get locked into a relationship, often a very abusive relationship, with the vendors that are providing their technology. And when it comes time to try to extract themselves from that relationship, they can't. And this is one of the reasons, in my opinion, why there hasn't been enough innovation, especially when it comes to developing new products for new platforms. Witness the great number of page flipping apps for tablets, where people just decided, well, we're just gonna barf out a PDF and we're gonna put it up on an iPad or something like that. Open source is also really good because it allows for rapid development. You can work off of things that other people have been working from as well. And that leads to benevolent innovation cycles, meaning that you come up with something good and then somebody else adds to it, and then it gets better and better. For us also, open source is just works, and that's a really important thing. We have 4 products right now. They're called Airtime, BookType, NewsScoop, and SuperDesk. And I'll explain a little bit about what each of them does. Airtime is a tool for radio broadcasting, both broadcast and streaming. If you want to create an online radio station, you can using Airtime. Or if you want to use it for automation of a shift that nobody wants on broadcast. For example, midnight to 6 a.m. I know this because I also work as a DJ on a radio station in Prague, and nobody wants to come in to do the midnight to 6 shift, and we have to rely on the world famous DJ Random Shuffle. Pause for laughter. Yeah, see.
You're starting to sound a bit annoying.
No. Anyway, so airtime. See, I'm trying to pick it right back.
Yeah.
No, airtime is kind of neat this way because there's a lot of different uses for it. Another interesting thing is that news organizations like the Boston Globe or Monocle 24 are moving from their printed products into online radio. Monocle 24, if you haven't heard it, is a fantastic online radio station based out of London, but with a real global focus. That's one approach. It's kind of like, sort of like a BBC Light, a lot of talk shows and things like that. But the Boston Globe has done something completely different. They've said, okay, we're going to have a classic rock station, only available online, and it's going to be sort of a companion for the people who are reading the website. And that's an interesting approach, and this is something that we are very interested in trying to support as well through tools like our airtime. One of the places that we're using airtime is a project called West Africa Democracy Radio. This is a regional radio network based in Dakar, Senegal, and they're on FM, they're on satellite, and then they're online as well. And they work with a lot of different local partners. What we did with them was that we created a workflow that allowed them to be both online and on air. So they're using two of our tools, Airtime and NewsScoop. And we went out to Dakar. We've been out there a few times now to show them what's the latest stuff and how they can take advantage of what other people in our communities have been doing. And what's kind of neat is that we just provided the seeds of these ideas, and then they've completely ran with them. Now they have 75,000 followers on SoundCloud. So there are a lot of people who are completely bypassing their website even and just going directly to the SoundCloud page to get the latest news and things. That project won us a Knight Batten Award in 2011. The big winner that year was Storify, and then it was us and Andy Carvin of National Public Radio who were the recipients of that award. BookType is another one of our projects that I think is pretty sexy. This is a platform for creating ebooks and in a collaborative environment. So one of the interesting things about ebooks is that you can rapidly create a book. You don't have to necessarily go through the entire print production cycle, right? You can just go direct to an ebook format very quickly. I saw one today. Wired magazine in the U.S. Had an ebook single about the story of John McAfee, the fugitive software, McAfee security and all that. Well, the guy's wanted for murder, right? Well, Wired magazine happened to have a very large article about this, and they went directly from they've bypassed the print process for the entire article. They've excerpted it, but the entire story is now available as a single in ebook format, and they're charging 99 cents for that. And so that's an example of the kinds of things we're trying to support in that space, where we think that this actually poses a very significant opportunity for news publishers to make some money through creating books and things that are tailored for reading on things like the Kindle. BookType allows for production of books. We've also come up with a whole concept of rapid book creation called a book sprint. Just like for the coders in the house, you've got code sprints. You can also have a book sprint where people take pieces of a book, maybe one or two chapters, authoring one or two chapters, and then if enough people are authoring individual chapters, then we can all come back together at the end of, say, 1 week, and we have a whole book that's ready to go. We've done this on several occasions. We're doing it probably about once a month now with various organizations where we're able to actually really rapidly create these books and then using BookType to actually output them to print on demand, if necessary, if people need a printed copy of a book, or to go directly to the Amazon store. So that's what BookType can do. Another example of what we're doing is we're working with an organization called Siavula in South Africa. And this is another area which is a little bit outside of our absolute core mission, which is supporting journalism, but I think it's really significant nonetheless. Textbooks are really expensive to create, and they're really expensive for school districts to buy. And if you're in a place like a township in South Africa, you probably don't have enough money to buy one of the expensive books that's made by somebody abroad. So what a group of South African teachers have done is they've taken the BookType platform and they're creating their own textbooks for learning math or learning science, and then bypassing the entire school book bureaucracy to actually get these things directly to the students, either in on cheap e-readers or in print on demand. So Siavula has already created 2.5 million textbooks, and they're working right now with us on providing better support for math equations, which is really important for academic uses. But that's another example of like what you can do with the BookType platform. NewsScoop is a CMS that we've created which is specifically for newsrooms. And one of the nifty things about NewsScoop is that it understands, I mean, it obviously CMSs are very similar. Every CMS has a very basic approach. You know, WordPress users. How many WordPress users in the room? Okay, yeah. You write a post, you put it up, you hit a button, it appears on a page, right? That's the basic function of a content management system. But the problem is that for a newsroom, the needs of that content management system get a lot more complicated the more people start to use it. So what we've done is we've created a specific purpose-built CMS for newsrooms that includes things like geolocation or shared multimedia archives. One of the places where we're using NewsScoop is in Sana'a, Yemen, with an organization called the Yemen Times. This is probably one of the few independent sources of news in that region. It's actually in English, and even more radical for Yemen, it's an organization that's run by a woman, which is even more unnerving to the powers that be there. But NewsScoop, as a CMS platform, has editorial workflow built in. So a reporter writes something, then an editor edits it, they pass it on to the next editor, and then it goes out to the site. It has support for things like adaptive CSS, which is important if you want to do things like on tablets. You know, let's flip it this way, we'll flip it that way again, and the page will relay out. Which is different than a lot of CMSs where you don't really have a lot of design flexibility in the creation of your templates. Superdesk, though, is the project that may interest the hackers in the room the most. This is the project that we're working on very, very intensively right now. Superdesk is our sales guys are kind of, you know. One of the things we're doing with Superdesk is really trying to take this idea of create once, publish everywhere, and make it really happen. One of the things that we've seen is that obviously news organizations are trying to repurpose content in many different places. So, you know, we have a print publication, we have an online publication, we have possibly a radio station, possibly a TV station, all owned by the same media house. And so the more content that can be reused, the more opportunities that organization has to make money from it. Anyway, Superdesk is interesting, and one of the places that we're working is in the developing country of Switzerland. Those guys are they're really poor. We got to send them some money. Somebody's got to do something about those poor Swiss. There's an organization in Basel, Switzerland, that we've been working with for the past year and a half, 2 years, called Tageswoche. And Tageswoche is significant for many reasons. One of them is that it's one of the first news startups in Switzerland in a very long time. What happened was that the staff of the Basler Zeitung walked out. The paper was taken over by a right-wing politician. He was the guy behind the initiative against the minarets, banning minarets in Switzerland. It's like there aren't any minarets in Switzerland, but this right-wing guy said, well, we can't have any minarets in Switzerland. And so he had a big campaign about that. Well, this guy took over the Basler Zeitung newspaper and wanted to take the newspaper very far right. And the staff walked out. And what was more interesting and more significant was that the people in Basel, who are normally very conservative and very, they're very Swiss, they came out in the thousands for rallies in support of the editors who walked out. So the editors that walked out then started this new newspaper or this new organization called Tageswoche. And they like to describe themselves as a website that happens to put out a newspaper on Fridays. And I like that approach because it really is digital first. So for Tageswoche, we built a lot of the Superdesk modules. One of the interesting ones is a thing called Print Desk, which combines the web workflow with Adobe InDesign so that the articles are automatically visible and they flow back and forth from web to print and back. The city of Basel and the region, the German-speaking regions in Switzerland have really gotten behind Tageswoche. 5,000 subscribers. There's also a very active community involved there. 100,000 circulation. I was just in Zurich about a week ago, and I even saw the paper in the Zurich airport, which is a good sign. And what's been really nice about working with Tageswoche has been that they've been very active in helping us shape the tools. And this is exactly what we were looking for when we say that we want an open source development model. Everybody can say, this tool ought to do this. Your tool, it doesn't work as well as it should. Let's fix that. And they do. And they give us feedback, or they even commission work to be done. Another interesting project that we're working on right now is in collaboration with the Global Editors Network, which is a worldwide consortium, an organization that brings together the top newspaper editors or news editors across media worldwide. They came to us about a year ago and they said, we'd like to build a live blogging tool. Can you guys build us a live blogging tool? And we're like, sure, we can build you a live blogging tool, but there's lots of other ones out there. Why should we build another one? And they said, well, because for example, you can't have, well, for one thing, it's not open source. They're all proprietary, and all you can do is embed them on your page. You can't have the ownership of the content itself. That sits on the servers of these sites. Another big one is they said we want the ability to put ads into the live blogging stream, right? We want the ability to put pre-prepared content into the stream. So let's say you're covering a football match and there's a goal. You can have a graphic ready that says goal, that kind of thing. So Jen, the Global Editors Network came to us and they said, well, okay, we have this specification. The specification was written with Le Monde, with the BBC, was paid for by Google. One of the editors at The Guardian helped to shape the spec. And then they gave it to us and we started coding it. And we've just actually today released version 0.9. It's up on GitHub, and you can get it there if you're friendly with Python. But what was it? A week and a half ago, they had this thing in the U.S. There was this guy. He got elected president. You guys might have heard about that. Pause for laughter. Anyway, we were working with an organization called the International Center for Journalists, which brought 50 foreign reporters into the United States to cover the U.S. elections from battleground states. And so all these 50 reporters were on the live blogging system, the Gen Live Desk, and they were able to actually provide live coverage through the ICFJ website, and then it got picked up by the Huffington Post, which was actually really nice. Another organization we're working with on this kind of stuff is Thomson Reuters. And Thomson Reuters has been saying, you know what we need? We need a tool that'll allow us to manage news feeds better and ingest sources coming from lots of different places. And so this is one of the things that we're very, very heavily working on right now, the ability to take, say, a fire hose Thomson Reuters feed and then allow individual editors to sift out the things that they really need from that feed and do that really quickly. And this is, what's interesting is that all these things on the Superdesk side are happening because we've also created our own Python development framework. So this is an alternative to Django. It's an alternative to other development frameworks. It's a thing called AliPy, which is specifically built for news organizations and the use cases that news organizations have. So yeah, that's a little bit about us. And yeah, I hope I haven't taken too much time, and I hope.
No.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, one of the things that is significant about our organization is that everything that we do is it's transparent, it's open source, so you can get out to our site and download the projects or the products as they are. But if you want to see what the code looks like, you can always go to GitHub and take a look at the source code itself, fork it. We love it when people fork our stuff. And one of the things that we're trying to do, and one of the reasons why I'm here, is to try to grow the user base of these open source tools that we've created, so that every time, this is true with all open source projects. The more people that use them, the better they get, and so the community grows, people help each other, but also the tools get better because more people are using them, and so that hopefully will continue to be the case. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Doug. So we've got plenty of time for questions. So anyone who would like to go first? Actually, before you do, I forgot to do something that I usually always do in the beginning. So I wanted to ask how many here consider themselves to be hacks, as in journalists? All right. And hackers? Yeah, a bit less hackers. And, well, anyone who doesn't really belong to either. All right.
Here for the free beer.
Yeah, so it's probably a bit less hackers than we normally have, but it's because of the clash with the other event called Slush. Anyway, go ahead and ask questions. Jussi, you go first.
I can start. For someone who's like bootstrapping a website or like a journalistic project or thinking about doing something like that, what's like how would you compare your tool with WordPress and other things that are out there? What's like sort of where does come point where you should like think about Sourcefabric and not think about WordPress? Where would you like position your?
The way I like to explain it is that superficially, these tools are all the same. I mean, whether you're talking about WordPress or Drupal or Joomla or our stuff, it's kind of like the difference between a tractor and a Ferrari. They have four rubber tires. There's an engine, an internal combustion engine, and I wouldn't use my Ferrari to plow a field. I wouldn't use my tractor to, attract potential mates. Unless I'm in certain parts of the world where they kind of dig that stuff. But the thing is that the tools are similar in a lot of ways. But so if you've got a startup that's like one person, two people, probably WordPress is going to be fine. But when you start to work in groups, this is where the WordPress model starts to fall apart a little bit. You have to start adding a lot of add-ons and plugins to really make it do what you need to do. So our stuff is sort of like built with the assumption that you've got a newsroom. So if you have a newsroom or some kind of an editorial process in place, then yeah, it would make sense. Otherwise, yeah, use one of these other tools. And there are a lot of really awesome ones. Some of my best friends develop on WordPress. I have only good things to say about WordPress, and but it also, you have to recognize that it's not a perfect tool for everything, and this is often the case in the open source world where people become maximalists. especially Drupal developers, kind of get this way. Don't hit me. They kind of like, well, it can do absolutely everything. It slices, it dices, it'll mop your floor. It's Drupal. But the thing is that, yeah, yes, it can do that, but you have to look at how long it will take you to actually, get from conception to having something in place that works.
Questions? Antti?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Antti Poikala. I'm really interested in the Booksprint concept, and actually we are planning to make Booksprint here in Finland. Not quite sure yet the final group and topic, and we are looking for a book type as a platform. This is general question about Booksprints. What have you learned? Any tips and tricks for beginners?
I haven't led a book sprint myself. The father of the book sprints is a guy by the name of Adam Hyde. He is the founder of a thing called Floss Manuals, which was this organization. What he saw was that in the open source world, not only is the code really poorly documented, but there are very few really well-written end-user manuals. And so he took it upon himself to create a website that is a repository for open source manuals, or manuals for open source products. Like, for example, Firefox didn't have a manual until like a couple of years ago, right? And like, how did that happen? Finally, what they did was they got the book sprint together and made it happen. I've been through book sprints. One of the things that I've come to appreciate myself is just the importance of style. Working really quickly, it's often very difficult to make sure that you have enough copy editing and attention to the quality of the text. That's one tip on the book sprint. Another one is making sure that you have enough visuals. Unless you have like a very pure text-only thing. Compelling visuals are also really important, and the problem is that when you have a very limited amount of time to create the text and to get the book out, the quality of the visuals can often suffer. And so trying, just like with any restaurant, you have a kitchen and the chef doesn't go through and make everything absolutely from scratch all at once. They have people who are preparing things in advance, and you can always prepare in advance of your book sprint. And so that's also an important thing to keep in mind. You don't have to completely create absolutely everything in the limited time that you have. You can always bring things to the table. Another thing that's also useful to keep in mind with book sprints is that a book can be a living document. It can be like software. You can have version 1.0 and then version 1.1. You can go back to it and you can update it once you've got the stuff in the right places. And so a system like BookType will really allow for that, where you can go revisit the book and say, oh, you know what? We're gonna de-emphasize MySpace in a book on social media, and we're gonna emphasize a lot more things like Pinterest, right? So we'll take out the chapter on MySpace and we're gonna put in a chapter on Pinterest, right? And you can do that in version 1.1 of the book, just like you do in even in editions, first and second edition, third edition of a book. So yeah, that would be another thing to keep in mind there. But yeah, book sprints are great. It's also a really fun thing to do, and this is, I think, a model for publishing that is also going to really start to explode, especially once people start to recognize that or realize that they can do all of this stuff without having to rely on the apparatus, the machinery of book publishing, as has been the case in the past. Another thing that I forgot to mention during my talk is that everything that we make is also available as a service. So software as a service is something that we provide. It's part of our business model. And by that, it happens a lot, especially with the book people. Book people tend not to be very technical, right? So especially for them, being able to provide hosted book type service is a really important thing, because they're those publisher types. They wear the suede patches on their arms. You know what I'm talking about, like pipes and stuff. Those guys, it's not like they're going to get in and hack Python, right? So for them and for a lot of the organizations that we're working with, we do provide software as a service. So we take care of all of the sysadmin. We take care of all of the, the really icky, software updating. MySQL has a new version now, right? And so we provide, all they have to do is just log in and go. Kind of like with Google Docs or with WordPress or things like that.
Yeah, Juho.
Hi, I'm Juho Salminen from Ottawa Media. Can you tell us a little bit more about the business model? Where's the money coming from?
Oh, many places. You. No, we're a nonprofit foundation, so we do a lot of fundraising. We have a combination of unrestricted grants, project grants, and then commercial work. Certain foundations really like what we do, and so they just give us money. We think you're awesome. Here's some money, right? I know, it's pretty cool. But then there are also parts of the world that need attention, or where the news media needs a lot of support. We're doing a lot of work in the Caucasus right now, for example. Right now, I think the number is 11. We're working with 11 news organizations in Georgia. So 11 news organizations have sites that run on NewsScoop that we set up and trained and operate the back end for them as a service. And those sites are, they're paid for by, that was IREX, so that's USAID. But other foundations in other parts of the world have commissioned us or given us grants to do similar things. So there's, the sort of project funding. And then the commercial stuff. So like those poor guys in Switzerland, right? They look at our rates, because we're in the Czech Republic. They look at our rates and they're like, "You guys are super cheap. We're going to hire you to do our commercial work," and we do that too. So it's a combination of all those things. And so far it's okay, And to my open source brothers, solid. You guys can make money using and building open source software, and that's something that a lot of times a lot of people tend to overlook. They think that it's only based on passion, but the open source model can actually build some terrific businesses, and even in the media space, and we're living proof.
Yeah, you want to say that?
Oh,
no, please go. Okay, so you look into the future. What do you see when you look at the future of news?
Wow. Small question.
Give me the big picture.
Oh man, I see a lot more lean organizations. I see a lot more collaboration between news organizations. This is one of the things that we worked on with the Global Editors Network on LiveDesk. One of the use case scenarios that we had was when we started writing the spec, the fighting was really underway in Libya, and Gaddafi had not been ousted. So one of the scenarios that we were working with was, here's a correspondent for Le Monde, and he's in Benghazi. And here's a correspondent for Le Figaro, and he's in Tripoli. And here's a correspondent who is out somewhere in the desert for the New York Times. How can the three of those organizations pool their live coverage on an event that's happening really fast? So it's mutualization of effort, I think, is something that we're going to see a lot more of. And that's simply driven by economics. That people don't have the resources to send an entire team to Libya. But if you can create these loose ad hoc groups of people that come together they assemble to cover something, that can also work. Some of that happened with WikiLeaks as well. WikiLeaks is its own can of worms, but I think that this ad hoc collaboration is something we're going to see a lot more of. What else? Future of news stuff. Just lean organizations. Everybody has to get leaner. The money just isn't there to be able to do things like the Daily, right? Rupert Murdoch spent 30 million euros, pounds.
Not sure.
Ding-dongs.
Yeah.
He spent 30 million ding-dongs on making this iPad site called The Daily, right? And then the whole thing tanked. Nobody bought it, right? And so he lost almost all of that investment, or a very significant chunk of it. there aren't many people that can afford to do that right now. And that model of creating new media ventures, I think, is probably at its end. And so, again, using open source or easily available cheap tools, we're going to start to see more sort of rapid creation of things. Many of those things will die, but at least they won't go completely bankrupt. They're not going to lose $30 million in the process. So that, I think, will also be significant, that people won't necessarily be making massive investments in new ventures. Instead, they're going to be evolving them and growing them organically. And so I think that's also something that we're really trying to encourage in that space. But man, I got to put on my future hat now.
Where do you see? I mean, if you look at the world of more things are happening. What do you see? I mean, are there spots where you see really interesting things, or is it just all over the place?
One of the things that I say as an American is that when people talk about the future of news, there is this incredible U.S. centricity to this stuff, and there is this, there's like this whole apparatus of the future of news, which is very U.S. centric, and things that are happening outside of the U.S. really tend to get overlooked. One of our biggest projects this year was in Brazil with an organization called Brazil 24/7. Out of nowhere, these guys are now like one of the biggest online sites in Brazil, and nobody thinks of Brazil as being a hotbed of new media innovation. It's mainly because nobody really pays attention to it, right? This is, I think, one of the more significant things, that there is innovation happening. It's happening all over the world. It's just that, we all go to, any of the future of news sites, and it's always like, well, we have our UK blinder on, right? Or we have our US blinders. And so I think that, if people take a larger or broader view, that they'll see that there's really a lot going on in a lot of different places. And again, to go back, I keep pouncing on this open source model, right? Part of that is knowledge sharing, right? Hacks Hackers is a great organization for promoting this idea of knowledge sharing, even among organizations that are possibly even competitors, right? There are a lot of competing news organizations even in this room tonight. But what we can all do is we can bring ideas together where there are certain things that are just really unsexy plumbing type stuff, right? That's the kind of stuff where we can all really collaborate a lot better using the open source model. That, I think, would also really help a lot of organizations out because, again, it saves them money, it saves them time.
Well, all right. Just wondering, back to the future, back from the future to the present. In Finland, we have the situation right now that the biggest media site basically put on a paywall. Mm-hmm. We also have a lot of talented journalists freelancing or doing something else. So I'm just wondering, what if I just have this idea that, okay, maybe I just hire 10 brilliant journalists, and I have this idea, maybe we're doing something like Gentleman's Quarterly meets The Economist, and I just all right, let's do it. Yeah. How can the Sourcefabric tools help me, and what's the roadmap of going forward?
Well, I mean, the point there is, if you got 10, we're sitting around, we're drinking beers right now, and hey, let's start a newspaper. Yeah. Right? Hey, all right. You could just download NewsScoop, set up your own installation, or you can use our SaaS, and use it takes care of the plumbing. Right? You have to write your articles. It's not going to write articles for you. It's not going to make your great editorial content. What it's going to do is just provide a framework for your content, whatever it is. And if you decided to make your site, then you could totally do it on one of our tools, either Superdesk or on NewsScoop, depending on which area you wanted to go into. But the thing there is that you still need the concept. You need the sell. Right? You need to make that thing sexy. What is useful though is that the assumption that you have a newsroom in place is a really important one. One of the things that, again, I'm not slagging on WordPress, but I'm going to slag on WordPress. They don't have this really easy way to allow for multiple stage editing, right? So either usually you write an article in WordPress and it's like, boom, you hit publish, it's out on the site, right? Only with certain steps can you invite someone to edit something before it goes out. In ours or in other sort of specialized tools for newsrooms, there is an assumption that there's a workflow, that it has to be edited by several people before it goes out. And that alone is worth a lot. Another thing is a centralized media archive, right? GQ meets The Economist, right? So you're going to have, barely clothed economists like Milton Friedman, hot, right? Barely clothed economists, right, in beautiful pictures, but you will need to access those pictures for every article, and being able to have all of that stuff in one place will save you a lot of time too. And that's something we've got. So yeah, it's there. Yeah.
Like you said, open source, it needs a lot of collaborators.
Yeah.
You need to have lots of people making it to make it work. So now you have created your own open source system. Why haven't you contributed to existing open source system? Like you said, WordPress doesn't have these kinds of tools. Why haven't you built these tools into WordPress so you could get the WordPress's community to help you and get the WordPress's community to help the news desk to create these sites?
This is a really common problem in the open source community overall. KDE versus GNOME, Firefox versus Chrome, Ubuntu versus Debian even, right? Why are there all these different things that have come up? Well, one of the reasons is that people, first off, they have different use cases for the stuff that they have.
Thinks they have a better way to do it.
Also, but when we don't have a lot of money to spend on this stuff, and when we do identify a need, we have to look at what's out there and really try to see if it's going to fit our needs. For example, with BookType, right? We were using TikiWiki originally, right? But TikiWiki, we had, in order to make BookType do what it had to do based on TikiWiki, we really would have had to rewrite TikiWiki anyway, and the TikiWiki developers didn't want us to do that. So that was an example where we were just going to develop it to within an inch of its life anyway, and then the question would be, and this is something that's happened a lot, especially with Drupal, in editorial situations, where you've had things like I'm trying to think of the word, the Drupal, what's it called? I want to say press flow, but there have been a number of these initiatives to take Drupal and either create Drupal distributions that are based around editorial workflow scenarios, or to even just hack the hell out of Drupal to make it do what they needed to. And in the end, it still doesn't quite work, right? So even there, you can take a tractor and you put some really fat tires on it, and you can you can paint it red, and you can put jet engines on the damn thing. It's still going to be a tractor, right? And that's fundamentally the problem. So for a lot of the stuff that we're doing, we do look at it, and we really do try to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. We do a lot of upstream contributing as well, whenever we can. Case in point was WK to HTML. I think that's the name of the project. It was like a converter for it'll take a Word document and then convert it into HTML. It's kind of important for BookType, and we really wanted to work on it more, but it turns out that the upstream developers aren't even developing it actively anymore. They lost interest. So then what, right? So when we try to be good citizens in the open source community, and we encourage people to do the same. And when we can and where it makes sense, we absolutely do it. It's just that, again, workflow and editorial, newsrooms are kind of their own specific beast, and this is something that kind of requires some more specific tools. I could use a Swiss Army knife to hack down a tree. Yeah, if I spend enough time on it, it's going to just, it'll eventually fall, right? But it's probably better to use a more specialized tool to do that.
Yes, I have here one question. We have now 6 online followers, so this comes a little bit back to the previous topic from the future of the journalism, easy topic, right? So when is a paywall good? When it is not? Are we witnessing a change nowadays? Are people more willing to pay now than before? What's the future?
Man, I think I'm going to have to charge you a lot of money to answer all of those questions perfectly. And I'll put that, all this will be inside of the information behind my paywall. No, paywalls, we've seen, we had our first experiment with paywalls in 1999 with an organization called Transitions Online. And because, what we saw at that time was that it was very specialized information that you could not get anywhere else. It was a very high quality. And the other thing that is really necessary for a paywall to work, in my opinion, is that you need a really engaged readership. They must love your brand. They must love what you're doing. 2001, we tried a paywall with a former samizdat organization in Croatia. They have a great name. They were called the Feral Tribune, right? Really just these radical anti-war Croatian activists. And all through the 90s, they were against the war. And then all of a sudden the war stops and they had to really make money for themselves, right? But they had a really passionate readership, and the readership really wanted to give them money so that they could continue with their work. And when we instituted a paywall with them, we were shocked. They made $17,000 in their first month in subscriptions, right? And for a group of scraggly anti-war activists in Croatia, that's pretty good money, especially in 2001. So for me, one of the real keys about the success of a paywall is the ability to really tap into the passion of the users or the community behind it. And paywalls can succeed, as we've seen with the New York Times. They can succeed if there is enough of that passion. I've been paying for my New York Times for almost a year now. And we were just talking about this before. Personally, I feel like, man, I'm paying for this. I got to read all the articles in it now. So I'm like reading the real estate. I never read the real estate section. But I feel like I have to because I'm paying for it. So that, and I think that we'll also see some of those things develop further. I think that what also this will lead to, though, is a lot more in the area of community management especially for online offerings. That the organizations really need to pay much closer attention to the people who are paying for it, as opposed to just like ignoring the ads that you would normally ignore. But because people are actually paying real good money for the access to the site, you need to pay a lot more attention to what they're saying. And so community then becomes a really key factor in the success, I would say. But yeah, paywalls can succeed. And I think also things like the app stores, Google Play and the Apple App Store and others that are emerging now, the Windows 8 App Store and things like that, they also recognize that metered access is something that they can support as well. And so that makes it a lot easier. Individual transactions are becoming a lot more painless than they were before. When we did the site in '99, we couldn't even find a credit card transaction provider that would work with us in the Czech Republic. It was a really crazy thing. So they can work. I hope I answered the question. I hope I'm not repeating myself too much.
Can I just comment back?
Yeah.
We just put up the paywall. So
I know. I was going to ask you.
Yeah, we have to believe in it, and we do believe in them. But there's like this huge move in Europe, at least. I think you already saw it sort of in America, the first wave of that. But there's like this huge wave of paywall frenzy in Europe going on right now, because there's in basically in every Scandinavian country, all the newspapers that are not tabloids are putting on paywalls right now. It's in Sweden, in Denmark, in Norway not that much, but in all the other big countries actually it's happening right now. also in France to some extent. So it's sort of coming. It's a thing that's coming on this year and next year in Europe, and it's going to be really going to be tested here. So, and it's a different environment here because you do have a different media landscape here. You have a lot of strong public broadcasting companies that you don't have in the US, which is like sort of a challenge here, especially in Sweden, in Finland, in Britain, especially in Germany, not that much, but in France it is a problem. So we have to see if that what sort of an effect that has on it. But there's sort of momentum for people paying for content on the web, for sure. I think The Economist is like sort of living proof of that. The Financial Times is living proof of that. They are specialized newspapers, if you can call The Economist a newspaper, but there's like there's a lot of success there as well. And I think we're sort of seeing some signs of small publishers moving. Like I'm talking about like the HuffPo or something like that, moving towards things where you sort of try out, putting out magazine type of things that are free now. Like Engadget is doing this, Gizmodo is doing this. They're sort of putting out premium products that are free now, but they're sort of the reason they are putting them out is to make more money, and it's very difficult to think that they don't see like charging for that content at some point in time. So I think that's a strong sign of people, of belief in people paying. And so there's like these all small things happening. And personally, do you think that, like professional blogging is something that it's also sort of coming up? So if you like take like a fashion blogger, that's very a typical case you take in Finland or Sweden. You just these fashion bloggers who are like sort of making money on ads. And so they're sort of becoming brands that I think are maybe thinking or could charge in some way for things they do. They haven't sort of found the way, but I think if they could do it, they would do it. So I think that's something that's also going to happen. But for now, I think there's something happening in the pay, sort of the landscape there, and I think something's changing. I don't know if it's the time that you pay for things in a web browser. That's difficult, but you do pay for things on mobile. I think we're seeing that in places.
I really do hope that paywalls succeed, because I think that it's one of the last big great hopes. It's that and advertising, right? Right now in the Czech Republic, it's also interesting that one of the tabloids has launched a mobile virtual network operator, which is a really strange idea. Ringier did this as an experiment. We as tool makers, I lead a team of tool makers, and we have to be neutral on it. So like with Newscoop, we've supported paywalls since 1999. You basically can go through every article and click a button and say, this is behind the paywall, or this is free. And so that, you have that option, it's there, it's just like, it's already built in. For the Newscoop community, if you think that you can go with a paywall, then absolutely go for it. And the thing is, we've also seen during the elections and during Hurricane Sandy, a lot of news organizations put down their paywalls to allow people full access to the site, so that they could get the information. And this is also another important thing, that if the paywall doesn't work out, if your numbers are not convincing, you can always back away from it, right? And but I don't think that you're going to have to back away from it. And I think that the reason for that is the passionate community of people who really identify with your paper, and that will be the success factor. It's not necessarily about, well, I hate giving my credit card to a newspaper, or whatever the dumb reasons are that people don't sign up for paywalls. If people are passionate enough about your brand, they're going to do it. And that's always the most crucial success factor.
Oh, you had a question.
Yes, I'm a visiting professor in Tampere University, and I would like to ask Jussi that why did you start building so weak paywall? I mean that it's quite easy to go through it without pay.
Well, you can. Well, any paywall, if you're not like the London Times, is very easy to penetrate. So if you really want to break into something, you can break into something, and whatever you build, someone is going to break into that. So it's really, if you really just want to stop people from doing that, you can just spend tons and tons and tons of money on that, and the people who want to go through it, they still will go through it. But the point here is that I think most people are not, they are not willing to go through much trouble to do that. Okay, it doesn't take that much effort to go to a paywall, not much at all, but it's very similar to many systems that are used abroad. And I don't think like the main point here is to sort of stop people coming in, sort of just putting the thing out there. You can pay for this, and then if there is brand engagement, people will pay, because people are not just, you know, creatures that optimize the conditions for themselves. I think the people who are going to sort of always go around the paywall are not the people who would pay in the first place.
But it's not so difficult, because I have
it's
just got a quite new computer, and I just start in private browsing.
Yeah,
So
it's not
that's
difficult at all. Yeah.
So
All right,
what's the
but
point?
you can have the paywall conversation later.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I will pose the last question for Doug. Kind of continuing on the point Johannes was making earlier, like Johannes was asking about if he would start a new journalistic startup, then how could you help him?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of looking for a more specific answer as to if I have like a lean startup doing journalism, and I'm so lean that I can't afford to pay you.
Right.
So how far can I go with just the sort of free, you know, downloading the software and, you know, just on my own?
Right. You can pretty much go as far as your skills will take you. There are certain things that are going to cost money with any lean startup, right? Or, you know, for example, you can download any of our software, but then you have the ongoing cost of maintaining it, right? So you have to hire a system administrator or do that work yourself, right? So that's going to require either an investment of time or of money, right? Usually, I mean, we do supply some themes, you know, out of the box, but usually anybody that wants to do a really professional site is going to put some attention into the design of the project. So design is always a big outlay, and that's, you know, just brand design, not necessarily even having to do with you know, the nuts and bolts of Newscoop. So, you know, that would be a cost, and it's always a cost. What's cool about open source in general, though, is that, like, you don't have to hire us to do it. You could hire your friend, you know, you could hire that guy. No offense. You probably have. But, you know, the point is that you can hire someone local who may work for better terms or lower price than we would do, right? So you could do it that way, too. It's just, you know, you're building it on our platform. That's also really an option. And for in a lot of the countries where we work, we really try to encourage that, both as a way of supporting local developers and local open source scenes, but also as a way of really just getting to the prices that are most appropriate for that place. We've done work in places like Sierra Leone, where they can't afford a lot of things unless they're doing so with the backing of a donor, right? So they're able to work on things at rates that are appropriate locally. And that's totally fine too. You know, the point there is that it's not necessary. We benefit even just from having someone download it. You know, we benefit because the community is bigger, and you know, that's one less person who's using, you know, any number of other tools. So, you know, we benefit from that as well.
So you should basically start asking for more from the Swiss.
Well, this is actually the funny thing, right? Is in open source they talk about scratch your own itch, right? I got this itch and I'm going to solve it. I'm going to solve it by my own means. But what's cool about the open source model is that when you share your solution to your problem, chances are there's somebody that has the same problem somewhere else, and that is really an acute problem in the news media business, because when we've seen news organizations do this type of technical work, they usually do so in isolation. There is no mutualization of the cost of technological development, right? And there really could be. And this is one of the great bets that we're making right now, that the technical development actually can and should be mutualized among many different stakeholders in the news media space. Again, I'm not saying that everybody has to have the site that looks exactly the same. I'm talking about plumbing, right? I'm talking about really boring stuff that happens way behind the scenes. And the more that we get to that mutualization, the better off we're going to be, both in terms of making more stable software, but also making stuff that really addresses the needs that people have at the time. It's like tablets come out. Oh God, what are we going to do about our site? We don't have a tablet version, right? And you have to shell out a whole bunch of money to make the tablet version, right? In a more equitable environment or a more mutualized environment, the costs would be shared among a lot of stakeholders, and the tasks can also be spread out. You may have, a bigger news organization may have a couple of developers on their staff. They might have a couple of IT people, right? So they can work on something and then share this other part with another organization over here. It sounds kind of idealistic, but in real life, this is how most of the successful open source projects have actually worked. There are numerous stakeholders that can take apart or take one piece of the puzzle and work on that, and then share that piece with everyone else, and then everyone is lifted from it.
Great. Well, thank you, Doug. So we're going to have a small break now, and you can go and get a drink, or there's toilets here and downstairs as well. And no, free drinks later. And remember, don't take your glasses out of this room, because we need your empty glasses to pay the rent. So it's the paywall, remember. So see you in 10 minutes, and then we have Brella, and after